Okay, so today I'm going to be installing the RGH3 exploit on this Trinity Xbox 360. If you guys seen in my previous video, this had an older RGH exploit installed on it from well over 10 years ago, and it stopped booting somewhere along the way. This thing has been living in my basement for the better part of the last 10 years, and who knows what had happened, but we were able to remove all the existing hardware, this Coolrunner and quick solder board and stuff that I had installed like well over 10 years ago into the system, and was running that older RGH exploit on here when I'd wanted to do the new RGH3, but somewhere along the way it stopped booting, and I was able to remove all that hardware and re-flash the original NAND back onto this motherboard, and then from there I was able to boot again. So we were able to restore the functionality and got this thing back to stock, but now I want to install the RGH3 on here. So what I'm going to do now before I flip it over and do my wiring for the RGH3 is I want to just flash the RGH3 image onto the NAND and be able to remove all this wiring here and be able to work with the board a lot easier with it flipped upside down without these probes connected. So what I would normally have to do first would be able to get the CPU key, but since I did that well over 10 years ago, I still have a copy of my CPU key and the original NAND, which is programmed into this right now. So I'm going to flip over to my computer here now, and we'll get JRunner loaded up, and we'll be able to write all the RGH3 image back to the NAND here and then get this wiring disconnected. So with my original NAND loaded into JRunner, the one from 2011, I should be able to go ahead now and select RGH3. And then create the Zell, and then write that to the NAND. And that appears to be working just fine. So it has a bad block at 29, we knew that, and it looks like it remapped it, so that's what we were hoping to see. So now with my CPU key that I already got from before, I have that copied right now, I can paste that into here. Shouldn't have to change anything over here, and I am on the latest kernel there, so I'm going to create. And it's creating the image. Yeah, we know that we have a bad block. It's unfortunate that it's in the first 29. That's basically the worst place it could be, but we're hoping for the best here. Now that that's all created, we should be able to write that. So now we're writing the RGH3 NAND onto the NAND. So this will take a little bit of time. I'll probably speed this up. But once that's all installed, I should be safe to disconnect all the wiring and everything from here, and then go ahead and install the custom wiring on the bottom side of the board. And hopefully the first time we go to boot it, it's going to boot into RGH3. So, and it did detect that bad block at 29 that you can see. So hopefully it just remaps that, and that everything will be fine, we hope. Not even sure if that Zell process was even necessary. I think that's included when you're doing the entire NAND, but it would have been necessary to get the CPU key. So that was something that I had done previously, like I said. Once you write the first 50 blocks and your wiring is installed, then you can boot. And I would have done that to show you guys the process, but I need to get my wiring installed on the bottom first to be able to boot into Zell. And I didn't want to have to flip it over and do that work with these probes installed just here temporarily. So these probes are really nice to work with because you can reuse them so many different times, and read and write from your NAND just by soldering them in there and out real quickly. But they're not great, obviously, as you can see, for flipping the board over and be able to work on the bottom side of this. So I want to get those disconnected, so I'm kind of skipping that whole step since I already had my CPU key, and I can go straight to writing the RGH3 image onto the NAND, get that disconnected, flip it over, do my custom wiring on the bottom, and then when we go to boot this thing up the next time, it should be already ready to load right into the exploited kernel. So it's almost ready. So let's hope for the best here. I'm going to go ahead and shut that down now, and we can go ahead and get this disconnected. I can just fire up my soldering iron here. We'll get the power off the board. It looks like it was written successfully, so I'm going to hope everything there went well. We'll get this disconnected here. We'll get the NAND X programmer removed. Should be able to just really quickly and easily now, like I was saying, just disconnect all these little probes. So with those 7 connections, I believe it was, disconnected, I'll go ahead now and clean up that spot. You shouldn't even need to be working in there anymore. That should be the final time and I need to read and write to this NAND. RGH3, I don't think it's going to ever get much better than that, but it's easy enough, as you've seen there, to reconnect that programmer, read or write to that NAND. So with everything all cleaned up there now, we're going to go ahead and get this board flipped over. We got to expose a via on the bottom side of this board, and I'm going to be installing a surface mount resistor instead of an inline resistor that most people have used. I have a nice small surface mount one that'll mount on there and make for a cleaner looking install. Gotta go ahead now and get this X clamp removed. This tool definitely makes this a whole lot easier. Before this goes back on again, I'll apply the thermal paste. If you've seen in my last video, I just had this thing just temporarily installed so that I wouldn't overheat the CPU or anything just booting it up. Before that goes back together, it'll have MX6 installed there. So I gotta go now and find my resistor and get some wiring prepped, and we'll be back underneath the microscope for most of the rest of the work. I gotta expose that via there by etching away some of the solder mask that covers it right now, so that's kind of a delicate process that I'll be using the microscope for. Not necessary, but definitely helpful. So we'll be back with that. Let me get some stuff ready and we'll come back for the RGH3 wiring install. Okay, so one of the first places that I want to solder to is going to be here. This is where I'll be installing my surface mounted resistor. It's a 3K ohm in this case for the Trinity. So I'm going to apply some flux here first, and then I'm going to put some fresh solder on that pad, and then I'm going to come in with the resistor. I'm just going to come on there and make that point nice and shiny like that. Using my tweezers, come and position that like so. Like that. Just wanted to make sure it was nice and flush down to the board. Now it is. I don't need to come in there and clean that up yet because I'll be applying some more flux when I go and attach the wire to the other side. It's the other end of that wire that's going to be tricky. That's where I got to remove some of the solder mask. So maybe we'll go there next. I can see where I need to expose there now, so I'm going to go get the tool for that. And we'll start exposing that solder mask there in between on the C5R35, in between the R and the 3. That's centered on the screen there. And I'll grab a little scratch tool. I use a dental pick for this, and I'll just remove that solder mask. Okay, that should be enough. Come in there and clean that. You want to be very careful during this stage. You really only want to expose just a little bit of that copper. With that IPA all dried off, just come in there and apply a little bit of flux at that spot. Get up my soldering iron, clean the tip, apply some fresh solder, and then just apply a little bit of solder to that one point. Just like that. That should be enough there. We'll get our wire prepped. We'll cut everything to length and get it all trimmed. And we should be able to install that one wire now. The other one's quite easy after this one. This one's the only one that has some difficulty. We got the surface mount resistor already installed. We got this point prepped. That's really the only challenge, I believe, to this install. The rest of it, just 2 points to connect, which they're small, but they're fairly easy. Nothing like the challenge of just removing a via like that. That's probably the most difficult part now is behind us. I'm going there and clean that up a little bit. As you can see there, we have a nice, clean, shiny point to solder our wire to. So very happy with this install so far. Let's get our wires prepped and we'll get that installed. Be right back for that. Okay, so I think the first side I'm going to solder to will be the side with the surface mount resistor here that I installed. So I'm just going to apply a little bit of flux on the connecting side of it. By that I mean all over it, since that is not a very delicate process. And I'm going to put some solder, I think, on just one side of that. Put some on my tip. Hopefully I won't swipe this away. I can just get some solder to flow into it like that. looks about perfect. That's exactly what I wanted there. For the one side, I can go ahead and clean that up. I wanted to come off it at a right angle like that for the route that I'm going to take with it. Go ahead and clean that all up. And you'll see there that both of those connections look good and solid. Little tug test, and I mean, I can just tell by looking at it that we have no problems there. So now we're going to go ahead and position the other side of that. Okay, for this point here now, this is the one we had to expose. We're going to just apply our flux on there. Get our soldering iron, clean the tip, and just apply a very small amount of fresh solder to the tip. And we just want to come in with our wire. And I think we're good there. Yep, I'm not going to get too picky about it. I kind of wanted to have a little bit more on there. Definitely secured. That's kind of more what I was looking for. You can see it's more attached, or at least it looks like it's more attached. There's more solder on the wire itself. It feels secure. I just gave it a pretty good tug. I'm going to go ahead now and route this. Looks like it's going to route nicely. Just the right amount. I'm going to apply a little bit of Kapton tape there to hold it in its two places. Okay, so this is the next spot that I want to solder to. Come in with a clean tip with freshly applied solder and our wire that we already have cut to length. And shape it in the direction that you want it to travel, which in this case is going to be coming out at a bit of an angle here. Just like that. Clean that, give it a quick inspection. Nice clean solid connection there. Same idea here, just a bit of flux. I just want to shape this a little bit in the direction that I want it to go. I'm going to come around this post where the X clamp goes through there. Just like that. And that connection definitely looks to be okay. We can swing the microscope out of our way. We can just attach a nice little piece of Kapton tape there. I'm going to come through and I'm going to finish cleaning with alcohol before I put that last piece of Kapton tape down, just to make sure that all the flux, everything's off the board. Make sure everything's nice and clean. There. Very minimal install. Those wire lengths pretty much couldn't be any shorter. That's just 30 gauge wire I'm using in here. We're going to go ahead now, and before we put this all back together and test it, we're going to clear off the rest of that thermal paste and apply fresh thermal paste. Okay, same thing on the heat sink. We want to remove all the old thermal paste. Okay, so with that clean, the chip clean, just give it a few seconds and we're going to apply some fresh thermal paste and then reapply our heatsink and X clamp, and after that we should be ready to test. So I'm going to use MX6 here. Okay. Pretty healthy amount on there. Now we want to go ahead and the X clamp installed. Put the X clamp on here, fresh thermal paste in there, and the fan connected. We should be able to get this into the chassis. I'm going to get some things cleaned up around here, but we should be able to get this into the chassis and just hooked up temporarily to test it and make sure that it boots. So I'll be right back with that. There's our final wiring, everything on the bottom. Nice and short. Very minimal. Get all that down in place. We'll just connect the hard drive here temporarily. And then HDMI here. Faceplate module. I can just plug this in now. We're still connected with the ribbon cable. Power on here. Switch over to the retro tank and see if this thing turns on. Okay, so it turns on. And it's booting. So I think we got a good RGH3. Yeah. So this already had some stuff installed on it from before. Something had happened with that previous install Who's to say what exactly it was? But now we have RGH3 booting on this and everything seems to be working. So I'm just gonna cycle the power and then hit the eject and see if Zell boots, because we did have a problem with block 29 and that's in the first 50 blocks of Zell. So I just want to see that Zell boots. It did before on this because that's obviously how I got my CPU key and everything originally, but that was like almost 15 years ago. So let's see what happens now. I've never actually tried to do that without the DVD drive connected, because ejecting it is what brings you into Zell. So let's see what the eject button even does without the DVD drive connected. And it seems to boot into Zell. So either the remapping of block 29 worked, or block 29 being corrupted doesn't much matter for that process. But that's booting, and we're getting RGH3 almost instantly. It boots basically flawlessly now, at least on the 2 attempts. We can try one third one, just a regular boot, and it's booting almost instantly because it should come up any second now here. And again, so yeah, it's booting in like 5 seconds or less essentially, which, I mean, you couldn't ask for any better than that. So it's booting straight into Aurora. That probably needs to be updated. I'm not sure when the last time I did that was. I felt like this was working at one point and then stopped working. I don't know whatever caused it to stop working, but it's working there now nonetheless with RGH3 installed. I'll probably end up taking the same route with my other one, because I have another one with an older RGH, has this installed in there. Also replace the sound files and stuff in my other one. It has the R2-D2 or Star Wars Special Edition sounds flashed onto that one. I may leave it the same just for academic purposes, I guess, so I can have different models to test with. I have a dozen Xboxes around here, several JTAGs, yeah, all the different variations. But this is my first RGH3 and it was on a Trinity, so that's kind of the ideal setup. And I don't foresee this having any problems for a good long time at least. Big fan of the RGH3 project and all the ones that came before it that paved the way for this. The Xbox is basically exploiting itself now, whereas before we needed external hardware like this Coolrunner from Xecuter to be able to perform that task. So they've been able to figure out a way for the Xbox to basically become its own mod chip and exploit itself. And it's a very elegant and quick, flawless process basically now that it's installed. Don't know that anybody really cares to see me put this all back together, but there's going to be lots more projects. So if you guys like this kind of stuff, I hope to see you guys in the next video. Bye.